Been following closely. 13 international students at UMass Amherst and hundreds of others throughout the nation have had their visa status revoked. Now Amherst is making sure that those who have certain immigration statuses know their rights with a wallet-sized card. Western Mass News reporter Madison Lisowski went to Amherst to learn more.
These wallet-sized red cards are being distributed throughout Amherst, and I'm going to tell you exactly where you can find one and how to use it. On the Immigrant Legal Resource Center website, a statement regarding the red cards reads in part, quote, "All people in the United States, regardless of immigration status, have certain rights and protections under the U.S. Constitution. The ILRC's red cards give examples of how people can exercise these rights. However, they do not provide individualized legal advice." Kiko Mallon, the public health director for the town of Amherst, tells Western Mass News that regardless of a person's legal status, it is her job to ensure the health and safety of all residents in Amherst.
It doesn't matter to me what that person's legal status is, where they come from, the color of their skin, how much money they make. Everyone needs access to community health and accurate information about how to be the healthiest they can be.
These red cards, also known as Know Your Rights cards, are a way to communicate with federal agents such as ICE, letting them know that you are exercising your constitutional rights under the 4th and 5th Amendments.
The red cards are available in many agencies across the town and across Hampshire County that are working with immigrant people or people who might be concerned about their legal rights to be here.
And those agencies where red cards can be found separate from the Public Health Department include the Bangs Community Center, CRESS, or Community Responders for Equity, Safety, and Service, DEI offices, Town Hall, Jones Library, and the John P. Musante Health Center. Mallon tells Western Mass News that this campaign is extremely important for both documented and undocumented immigrants, making sure that they know their rights.
People know that that doesn't have to happen in the first place. They can keep their door closed. It can keep people safe, keep people healthy, and keep families intact.
And it aligns with the values of Amherst as a sanctuary city.
The town of Amherst is a sanctuary city, and it has a bylaw that prohibits employees from participating in federal immigration enforcement activities, and that's why the Red Card campaign is very much in sync with our values as a community.
We also spoke with Debbie DiStefano, the Chief People and Compliance Officer of Hilltown Community Health Centers, and she tells us that it is not only about rights, but also empowerment versus fear.
Making sure that they're empowered with the words and the tools so that way they know how to respond in situations is the best we can do when we're not with them.
DiStefano also tells Western Mass News that you can use this card with an officer rather than answering questions that may jeopardize your status, and you can slide it to the other side of a door, insinuating that you do not feel comfortable opening up.
There are constitutional rights even for folks who do not have certain documentations, and so we just want them to be aware of when they're asked questions, how should they answer, how should they respond, and what should they do in certain situations.
In the meantime, UMass says that they are doing everything they can to support students in this time, and they're connecting proactively these students to on and off-campus resources, including personal outreach from leadership within the Office of the Provost, Student Affairs and Campus Life, and the Office of Global Affairs. For more information on how to obtain one of these cards for yourself and what scenarios you can use them in, head to our website at westernmassnews.com. For now, reporting in Amherst, Madison Lisowski for Western Mass News.